And good evening. It is 9 p.m. on the East Coast. I'm Ben Swann. Here are the stories we're following tonight. First, President Trump puts a pause on bombings in the Middle East. Is this the start of diplomacy or just a pause before a much bigger fight? Plus, a growing concern inside the Pentagon. Is America burning through its missile stockpiles faster than it can replace them? And finally, as the Iran conflict continues, find out how Ukraine may be trying to link the two wars together. On this show, we know you don't need more content, but you do need context. Anyone can tell you what's happening in the news. Tonight, we hope to help you understand why it's happening, how it's happening, and how it affects you. This is America Now. And tonight, after months of escalating war, the United States has hit the pause button. President Trump temporarily halting strikes on Iran, saying he wants to give diplomacy one more chance, while warning that if talks fail, strong military action remains on the table. In fact, here's what he said earlier today on Air Force One.
We've pretty much destroyed their military. They want to meet, and we're meeting. We'll see what happens. There's a chance we could make a deal. Without what we did, they wouldn't even be talking to us. They requested a meeting through their surrogates and directly. And we're meeting, and, good things can happen. I guess oil dropped very big today. Stock markets, as of about an hour ago, was like through the rest. But no, they requested a meeting. They would not have requested a meeting if we were doing poorly. The only reason they want to meet is because we've been hitting them very hard.
Okay, so that's the official explanation. The president pausing further strikes because of negotiations. But behind the scenes, a very different debate is emerging because right now there are two competing narratives about what's really happening here, all right? The first one, many online are saying that this recent pause is because the United States is actually running dangerously low on the precision weapons needed to keep fighting. Reports are now coming out that the Joint Chiefs Chairman, General Dan Kane, warned President Trump that those U.S. interceptor stockpiles in the Middle East were falling to concerning levels, leading to the decision to pause operations. The second narrative, the United States still has ample capability, there's no problem there, and that the pause is about giving the Pentagon time to plan a larger, more decisive campaign. Now, you can decide for yourself which version you find most convincing. Honestly, time will tell us which version is actually true. But the evidence so far continues to point toward that first narrative, that U.S. missile stockpiles are falling so low that continued strikes could completely empty them. And if that's true, it's exactly what we've been telling you from the very beginning. And the numbers tonight, I got to tell you, they are staggering. Reports indicate that the United States has already burned through roughly 1/3 of its pre-war stockpile of key precision munitions. Up to 80% of THAAD interceptors have been expended. More than half of the Navy's SM-3 missile defense interceptors, those are gone. As much as 60% of Patriot interceptors have been used. Over 1,000 Tomahawk cruise missiles. More than 1,000 JASSM long-range strike missiles. And even much of the Army's smaller precision strike missile inventory has already been fired. And then there are reports that the shortage has become so severe here, that commanders are now having to prioritize which incoming Iranian missiles and drones they can afford to shoot down. That is not a position any military wants to be in. Also emerging today, documentary video of the late Senator Lindsey Graham from the start of the war. Have you seen this?
Look what we've done here. I almost cried.
Yeah, in that video, he says, look what we've done here. Graham says while laughing at the U.S. as the U.S. carried out its first strike against Iran. So while lawmakers, some of them, like Lindsey Graham, were giddy about running through munitions to fight a foreign war, well, now military planners are confronting a critical logistical crisis. Meanwhile, Iran is projecting confidence tonight. Its foreign ministry says that the war that was supposed to force Iran's surrender in 3 days has now dragged on for 5 months, leaving the other side stuck. Iranian state media also making extraordinary claims of devastating losses inflicted on U.S. forces, including aircraft, surveillance planes, helicopters, and refueling tankers. Now, by the way, we cannot independently verify those claims, but what is becoming harder to dispute is that Iran has not collapsed. After months of bombings, not one Iranian city has fallen. American planners expected Iran's missile inventory to shrink rapidly. Instead, Iran continues to launch ballistic missiles and drones while improving their effectiveness through better targeting, including outside support that U.S. officials have repeatedly warned about. So now the question, it isn't just whether America can keep fighting. It's whether it should keep burning through the very weapons it may need for a far bigger conflict. Because look, every Patriot, every THAAD interceptor, every long-range missile fired today is one that will not be available tomorrow. And if the United States is already having to conserve munitions in the Middle East, what happens? What happens if a second major crisis breaks out in the Indo-Pacific? That is the question Washington now has to answer, because whether this pause is about diplomacy or about necessity, the state of America's arsenal has become one of the most important parts of this story. So joining us now to discuss, we have Brandon Weicher, friend of the show here, joining us tonight. And Brandon is the author of the Weicher Brief on Substack and a guy who has been warning about this for 5 months, saying, we're burning through all these things, Brandon. You've said it over and over. We're burning through munitions, we're burning through stockpiles, and there isn't a plan here.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing because the people who are pushing this war, the neoconservatives, 20 years ago in the buildup to Iraq, it was the phantom nuclear weapons stockpile of Saddam. Well, here we are 20 years later, and now it's the phantom, a stockpile of secret weapons we don't know about in the public that supposedly the Americans have, and that's why we can keep going. In both cases, the neoconservatives were grotesquely wrong, and they got a lot of people killed, and they destabilized a lot of countries, and they did damage to our own country. And I think in this case, that's becoming eminently clear. The neoconservatives are completely clueless. They have absolutely no tether to reality. They cannot understand why this is happening, and it's because they don't know how to do math. Most of them are liberal arts majors anyway, so they don't know how to do math anyway, and that's what this is. This is a math problem, not a strategy problem.
It is a math problem. It is an economic problem, right? The economy of the U.S. military-industrial complex does not work. You cannot create 9 or 50 missiles a year and then turn around and have the Iranians creating 3,000 to 4,000 and say that math that works. When the Iranians are creating drones for $20,000 and we're creating Patriot missiles for $4 million apiece, the math doesn't work. And to your point, the greater danger here is that the neoconservatives, in their absolute bloodlust to have another war, have left us exposed as a nation in a way that I don't know that we've ever been. The rest of the world is looking at us saying, really? That's what it takes? 5 months and they don't have missiles anymore? The exposure here is, I think, very, very dangerous for our country.
Oh, it is. And, you're seeing right now the converging of the two wars into one, the Ukraine war and the Iranian war. Obviously, Ukraine just launched this attack on the Iranian cargo ship in the Caspian Sea. There is reports coming out of the Middle East that Ukraine has cells operating in Iraq that are attacking Shiite targets. I don't know if that's confirmed, but the point is the two are becoming one. And interestingly, there's a third leg to this two becoming one, and that's North Korea, because the same people in Ukraine saying that they had to go after Iran are claiming that 30,000 North Korean troops are coming into Russia to be deployed to the front for a new offensive that Russia's planning against Ukraine. So what you now have is Zelensky is trying to fuse the fate of Ukraine to the outcome of the Iran war and whatever conflict eventually erupts in Northeast Asia, which I think, by the way, is coming soon. I think the North is getting ready to attack South Korea soon. And I think that this is where you're seeing now the birth of World War III. And by the way, we don't have the weapons now to fight such a war. We were already hanging by a thread. This silly Iran war has completely broken the back of the U.S. defense industrial base. There is no way, even the best estimates say, it won't be till 2030 at least until when most of these weapons are resupplied. What do we do in the meanwhile? That's a few years away still. The wars aren't ending. What do we do in the meanwhile?
Well, and 2030 also takes into account the idea that we're not continuing to send off massive supplies to countries like Ukraine or firing them at countries like Iran. We're going to be talking in our next hour a lot about this fusion of the Ukraine war and the Iran war that Zelensky's pushing. But I do want to cover another point about it with you, which is that, first of all, Zelensky's a freaking madman. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And to your point about these now reports of sleeper cells for the Ukrainians in places like Iraq, it actually is confirmed now. And you look at that and you
Okay.
say, what is this guy doing? And how is the U.S. allowing him to like run around just kind of weaving more problems? He's dragging us in, right? No wonder Lindsey
right.
Graham loved him so much. No wonder Laura Loomer loves him so much, because he's just a troublemaker who is trying to force our nation into a war that we cannot win, as he sits himself in a war that he cannot win.
Well, and he's also another one of those. The Israelis are the same way. They think we have secret stockpiles that we don't talk about. And so they're all convinced, the neocons, the Ukrainians, the Israelis, they're all convinced that we've got some secret stuff hidden away. And all they have to do is push us farther into war, and we'll bring that stuff online, and that'll be the deal. You know, that'll end the whole problem for everybody, and we'll be okay. But the Americans have to be pushed into it. And they don't seem to understand that we have existed since the end of the Cold War, just-in-time logistics. It's not just for UPS or your local grocer. It's for the defense industrial base as well. And that just-in-time logistics is great when you're the unipolar power fighting, Al-Qaeda in the middle of nowhere. It's not so great when you're up against a near-peer competitor who's had 40 years to prepare for this very kind of war. In that case, you're screwed. And the Ukrainians don't get that. They think we've got secret stuff. The Israelis don't get it. The neocons in D.C. cannot fathom it. And we're all going to pay the price for it, because this war is escalating. We don't have the ammunition to fight it. This is going to be a humiliating defeat for the United States, I think.
I think so. And, I saw there was an article by CNN over the weekend, and oh my gosh, Pentagon officials are worried tonight that the Russians and the Chinese are watching the lack of munitions, and then they're
laughing.
A calculus about what they're going to do. You think? You think that's happening? Of course it's happening. Every country in the world is watching this and saying, oh my gosh, there's this whole, look at like what the United States has projected itself to be for so long. And this war is becoming an utter humiliation for this nation. But again, it becomes dangerous because the deterrence factor. If you think your enemy has the ability to strike you, and obviously we still have nuclear weapons, but that's a loss for everyone, a zero-sum game at the end. The idea that we cannot conduct an actual war against what was just a regional power. We've elevated Iran. We've made Iran the most powerful nation in the Middle East at this point, and we have caused ourselves to decline. And making America great has made America actually weak in this case. I'll give you the last word here.
That's right. And I would argue that the Trump administration with the Iran war, the Biden administration with the Ukraine war, these two presidencies back to back has basically put a giant kick me sign on the back of the United States. And now everybody's lining up to take their whack, because this is it. When the big dog goes down, everybody wants to get their slice of the meat before he's gone. And that's what this looks like to me. This looks like a fundamental reorganization. We did it to ourselves. The smartest play would be pull out now. Don't even worry about a negotiated settlement. Just get us out of the Middle East, bring the legions home, because this thing only gets worse.
Okay, let me hold you over for just another minute here, because I think that's such an important point. There's all this talk about the negotiation, a new MOU, and how maybe we don't do any of that, right? Like Trump doesn't have to do that. He can just say, you know what, we're out. Forget it. We don't care about this. We don't need the oil. We don't care about the Strait of Hormuz. Just do the same thing you've been saying and take everyone home and leave.
That's right. And actually what would happen is, because the biggest issue for Iran in the near term is they don't like all the U.S. bases near their territory. If we were to literally pack up and go home, never to return, I guarantee you what would happen in short order would be the Iranians would initiate control over the Strait of Hormuz. And when I say control, I mean, it's like what the Turks are doing with the Bosporus. They'd exact some kind of toll. Okay, fine. But the Iranians want the oil now flowing because they can make money off of it. The Houthis actually want to deal with the Saudis. That's why they did what they did. They've been trying to get a deal with the Saudis. The Saudis keep saying no. Now they've got their hand on the jugular of Bab el-Mandeb, and now suddenly the Saudis are paying attention, and they might actually do a deal. If you get the Americans out, because we meddle, we're like like someone's mother-in-law, right? They're meddling all the time. It's like you need to just pull back and let the locals handle it, and the locals will figure out their own mess because they've been figuring it out for thousands of years. These are ancient cultures. They don't need Uncle Sam to tell them what to do. They'll figure it out. And the Israelis, by the way, will get real rational real fast if they know Big Brother isn't there to have their back. Then everything gets better, I think.
And to bring the whole thing full circle here, yes, the Israelis will get in line fast if they see that's happening because they'll realize we're out. I'll tell you who else gets in line. I think Zelensky then gets out of there because he realizes if we're going to leave Iran like that, we're not coming to save you either. And the world can suddenly get back to this idea of let's make peace great again. Brandon Weicher, so great to talk to you. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you later.
Well, sticking now in the Middle East, where, as we just mentioned, anger is mounting against Ukraine after Kiev launched attacks in the Caspian and Black Seas over the weekend. RT's Aditri Mishra has reaction tonight from New Delhi.
India has summoned the Ukrainian ambassador to the Ministry of External Affairs after a Ukrainian strike on the commercial vessel MV Amalfi killed an Indian national. Now, what we're learning here is that the Ministry of External Affairs has conveyed its serious concern over the attack, and it also strongly condemned the strikes on commercial shipping routes, saying that they threaten maritime safety, freedom of navigation, and also international trade. Another thing that we are learning here is that, according to the government here, the Ukrainian ambassador was asked to convey India's strong protest to Kyiv, with New Delhi making it very, very clear that these attacks that are happening, endangering innocent civilians, seafarers, they are totally unacceptable and must be avoided. The strike was part of a wider Ukrainian operation in the Black Sea, during which Kyiv claimed that it has targeted 13 vessels that were allegedly part of Russia's so-called shadow fleet. Now, this also comes amid growing concerns over the safety of Indian seafarers in international water and also those who are caught in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. At least 5 Indian nationals have been killed this month in 2 separate attacks in the Black Sea. Now, with this latest diplomatic moves, India has sent across a very, very strong message here that while the conflict continues in the region, the safety of civilian seafarers and commercial shipping, it cannot be compromised, and that should be taken care of. Aditi Mishra, Purati India, New Delhi.
Well, now Ukrainian strikes in the Caspian Sea have also prompted Iranian officials to threaten retaliation against Ukraine. RT Salman Kajori has more on reaction out of the Middle East. He continues our team coverage tonight.
All parties who consider themselves in some way supporters and backers of the Ukrainian regime must be held accountable in this regard. You cannot be certain that a theatrical action to attract attention, to demonstrate your not-so-significant weight in international equations, will remain merely at that level. Its consequences for you will certainly be unpredictable, as will the repercussions for the entire region that you have dragged into this. Well, 4 years ago, the Ukrainian regime brought its country down as a tool for geopolitical conflict between powers. We stated from the beginning that we do not interfere in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. This action by Ukraine was both an absolutely illegal and unjustified act contrary to the UN Charter and a dangerous adventure that will certainly not go unanswered by us. Zelensky's superiors must certainly both control him in this regard and be careful, as the actions of the Ukrainian regime can have repercussions that affect various parts of the world. We are aware that the countries bordering the Caspian Sea are deeply concerned and dissatisfied with this action, and the Ukrainian regime must certainly be held accountable for this act.
There is rising anger in Iran over the Ukrainian strike against the Iranian commercial vessel in the Caspian Sea, which led to the killing of 1 sailor and injury of another one. Well, Iran has warned of consequences as tensions between Kiev and Tehran continue to escalate. Iranian officials have warned of retaliation. In a strongly worded statement, Iran's foreign ministry, of course, Iran has also announced that it reserves the right to retaliate and also to protect its national interests. Well, in a telephone conversation between Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, as well as the EU foreign policy chief, well, Iran's foreign minister has blamed Israel for provoking Kiev for the attack. At the same time, Iran's foreign minister has vowed that Ukraine's military attack will not go unpunished.
Zelensky has attacked an Iranian commercial vessel, killing a sailor, a blatant UN Charter violation done at Israel's behest to drag Europe into its war. In calls with EU High Representative Kallas and Foreign Minister Lavrov made clear that what the freeloader in Kyiv did cannot go unanswered.
Well, this comes as Iran for long, believes that Israel is encouraging actions against Tehran beyond the Middle East. Well, Iranian officials argue that the Ukraine attack against the Iranian commercial vessel has been part of Israel's broader strategy of widening pressure on Tehran, by dragging other countries into the confrontation, especially at a time when, tensions between Tehran and Washington have a little bit eased down in the past couple of days. Well, this comes as Ukraine's leader Zelensky has announced that he does not want to open up a new war front. Of course, this comes as Ukraine initiated the war and initially launched an attack against Iranian commercial vessel. And indeed, Zelensky provoked the war and is waiting for retaliation from Iranian side. And at the same time, of course, despite the attacks, he has said that he does not want to open up a new war front, but he has once again repeated his old claim that Iran has been providing weapons and drones to Russia for attacks against Ukraine.
We have to be cautious. We have to do everything not to open new front in any way, but we have to be honest. Iranians and North Koreans already attacked us. We have to be ready for everything and to know that we can't trust these people, because at the very, very beginning, without any messages, any kind of escalation from our side, Iranians gave weapon, North Koreans gave weapon.
What is certain for now is that retaliation on the side of Iran against Ukraine for Kiev's strike against the Iranian commercial vessel is certain. But we have to wait and see when and how this will take place.
All right, turning our focus now to Gaza, where despite a ceasefire being in place, Israeli attacks continue today. 3 years after the bombardment first began, families tonight are still living in fear. Local journalist Rami Almagari filed this update.
Right at this site, around 200 Palestinian dead bodies have remained under rubble since 2023, or actually since November of 2023, when Israeli airstrikes have been actually more intensified than they are today, right at the beginning of the war.
We began this mission in cooperation with the International Committee of the Red Cross. The duration of this project is 400 working hours, and we began it here at this site to retrieve family members of the Hassaina family. So far, we have been able to retrieve 45 martyrs from this site where we are standing. This is the second such a project. The first was for 200 working hours for the Gaza Governorate. The second, current project is for a total of 800 hours, including 200 for the north and 200 hours for the central part of the region. However, this project is inadequate for retrieving all the martyrs of Gaza. Therefore, we call on the Red Cross and other relevant international bodies to provide bulldozers and other assistance for us to complete our mission.
Unfortunately, the families have not been able to retrieve the dead bodies of their beloved ones until recently, when the International Committee of the Red Cross, in cooperation with the Civil Defense Service in Gaza, began searching operations for these dead bodies right at this site.
They are the dead bodies of our sons, daughters and cousins. So we are highly concerned that they are retrieved. This is a story that speaks for itself. Israeli drones of aggression hit the family's meeting hall where there were family members and guests. The drones fired 2 missiles onto the hall, causing all those inside a great deal of panic and forcing them all to flee to a nearby home about 2 buildings away. As they moved, it seems that the drones detected the movements on the ground, and so they fired 2 more missiles. The total number of those people who left the family hall was 308. We have been able to retrieve many of their bodies. I estimate that the ones left under rubble are about 154 martyrs, including more than 44 children, 38 women and 7 elderly people as well, 9 who had special needs.
So far, 45 of those 200, almost 200 dead bodies have been retrieved from this particular site in the Sabra neighborhood in Gaza City. Rami Almigari, RT, in the Sabra neighborhood in Gaza City.
Well, that is America Now for now. I'm Ben Swann. For more stories, visit our website, rt.com, and join us every night at 7, 8, 9, and 10 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night. And remember, question everything.